Hi friends, this is Shekhar Srinivasan, Managing Director, LS Solutions Private Limited, an architect and a trainer. This is a part of the free video series on ASP.NET MVC FAQ. In this video, we shall understand one of the most important questions that have been asked these days in the interviews on ASP.NET MVC. That is, what is the difference between ViewData, ViewBack, Temp Data and Session? So in this video, we shall understand in detail what are the differences between all these four. ASP.NET MVC provides different methods for storing the data, for passing the data from controller to the view. So we have something called as ViewData, which is used for passing the information from a controller to the view. Whenever we wanted to pass the data from a controller to the view, we can take the support of ViewData. ViewData is an object which is based on ViewData dictionary, and whenever we use ViewData, we use an array-like structure for accessing the information. So ViewData, if I use it, we have to typecast to extract the value. And when it comes to the ViewBack, we can assume that ViewBack is a wrapper for a ViewData. It performs the same functionality. But where comes the differences? ViewBack uses C# 4.0 dynamic expressions. As a result, it is having a capability to trace out what type of value it is at the runtime. And hence we don't need to perform an explicit casting for the ViewBack. It's also uses for the same purpose. ViewBack also passes the information from a controller to the view. But when it comes to the accessing, ViewData uses an array notation, whereas ViewBack uses an object notation or a dot notation. When it comes to the Temp Data is used for passing the information from one action to the subsequent request or subsequent actions. The value present within the Temp Data will be available till the target is completely loaded. So whenever we have a requirement for passing some error messages or validation messages for one time, then we can take the support of Temp Data so that the information can be passed from one action to the other action or from one request to the subsequent request. Whereas Session is used for maintaining the information across all the requests. Now let's try to understand with a demo to practically explore the differences between ViewData, ViewBack, Temp Data and Session. Let's start the demo. Now let me try to open my Visual Studio.NET and I simply say File menu, New Project. I select an ASP.NET MVC application. Let me just try to say demo for FAQ. I select an internet application. Let the project get created. The intention is to understand how we can work with ViewBack, ViewData, Temp Data as well as Session. Just to do this, let me try to add a simple controller here. I just try to add a controller. The name of the controller, I just specify it as demo controller. I click on add. Now let me increase the font size for the visibility purpose. I just remove everything. Normally when we wanted to work with our application, we will have some actions to which we will send a request. For example, I may have something like public string welcome, which may takes a parameter. I can simply say return string.format welcome to ASP.NET MVC. Now say that I'm trying to accept some particular parameter information through the URL, and that information I just wanted to directly display. So I can just directly say ID and the return type string. Whatever the information you wanted to display, you can just do this. Let me try to execute this thing. I don't need a view for this, so I'm directly displaying this information. So let me just try to say /demo/welcome shaker. So I can simply understand welcome shaker to ASP.NET MVC. There is no beautification that is involved, just a string that is passed to the URL, and this information I'm trying to display back. Now say that your requirement is, I don't want it to display like this. I wanted to have a view for providing an efficient user interface. Then what I can do is, I may use some kind of action result, and let's say hello, where I say string ID. Now the information is going to be passed to the action which is present within the controller. Now I need a view for rendering this thing. The information is passed to the action of your controller and a view is used for displaying. Now my requirement is the information what I got, I wanted to pass it to the view. So anytime you have a requirement to pass the information from a controller action to a view, we can take the support of ViewData. ViewData uses an array notation, as I already discussed. So I can say ViewData of uname equal to the ID. Now when I just try to observe the ViewData, it is going to maintain a ViewData dictionary object. Now once I done with this, let me prepare a view. I simply add a view. Now my requirement is, I just wanted to show the content. So I simply say welcome. Whenever you're going to use something called as ViewData, it is compulsory that since ViewData dictionary is going to return an object, you need to cast it. So I say .toString to ASP.NET MVC. Quite a simple form. What I was trying to do was, I have some information which is present within the controller. This information I wanted to show on my action. So I'm trying to store the details on a ViewData and I'm trying to display. Let me execute it once again. So I can simply say demo/hello shaker. Now I can see that the information has been passed, a view has been rendered with the parameter. So whenever I have a requirement to pass the information from a controller action to a view, we can take the support of ViewData. Now say for example, when I have this particular thing, instead of using ViewData, I can also use ViewBack. So if I wanted to store the information as a ViewBack, I can say ViewBack dot uname equal to ID. Now the information, now you have to understand that when I use a ViewData, I was using array type of notation, and when I'm using ViewBack, I was using a dot notation. But both the things are one and the same. Both will try to store the information such that this can be passed from the controller's action to the view. Now I said ViewBack.uname equal to ID, and if you observe it in the view, I have still using ViewData of uname. Let me try to execute this and let me check out is it working or not. I just simply say demo hello shaker. I will get still the same result. There won't be any kind of difference. So whether you set the information using ViewData or whether you set the information using ViewBack, both returns the same details. From that particular action to that view, you will get the details. The difference what you will find between a ViewData and a ViewBack is, Whenever I use a view data, then I have to cast it, whereas ViewBack uses a dynamic expression, and hence I don't need this kind of casting. Directly I can say ViewBack.uName. ViewBack uses C# 4.0 dynamic expression, so there is no need of castings involved when I try to use the ViewBack, whereas view data needs that casting because it maintains it as an object style. Now the information I can just set it as ViewBack, and I can just collect it through a view data or ViewBack. So what is ViewBack and view data is, both the things are used for the same purpose, to pass the data from the controller actions to the view. View data needs some kind of casting, whereas ViewBack doesn't require that casting. View data uses an array notation and ViewBack uses a dot notation. Now once we are clear with ViewBack and view data, then what is temp data? To understand this, let me just try to add some set of actions. For example, let's say public action result, I'll say something called as create, which returns just a view. Now I write one more action, result create, which takes a parameter ID. Now my requirement is, I will try to have some form where I would like to collect the details, and the collected information I just wanted to pass it on to the other action. Now whenever you have a requirement such that the data of one particular controller action you wanted to pass it to the other controller action, or from one particular request to the other subsequent request, we can take the support of temp data. So what I can do is, I can simply say temp data of some uname equal to ID. And instead of doing this, what I try to do is, I say instead of returning a view, I will try to redirect to an action with the name called as index. Now so we have a create for the get request. Whenever you try to post the data, I'm trying to collect the value and I'm trying to store the information on temp data. Now the information what I provided in the temp data, I just wanted to access in the other action with the name called as index. So I just try to simply return the view. Okay, so let's try to create the views for our target actions. First I try to create the view for the create. I try to say something like create new user using html.begin form. Now I try to take some div tag where a paragraph, enter username. I take a HTML input, type equal to text, name equal to ID, ID equal to ID, a placeholder, enter username here. Quite a simple thing. Then I try to take one more thing called as input type equal to submit, where ID equal to, I just mention btn submit, and the value is going to be create. So we have a view which will allow us to provide some particular information. So this information will be posted to a controller action called as create at the HTTP post. This ID will be collected and I'm storing it onto the temp data. And this post create method simply redirects to an action called as index. So what I do is I try to create a view for the index. Now I just have the index view. Let me just try to have a div tag. I just simply specify welcome temp data of uname. Temp data also needs the casting to be done. So welcome temp data of uname.toString to ASP.NET FAQ. Now what is happening is temp data is used for passing the information from one particular controller action to the other action, or from one particular request to the other request. When you wanted to pass the data, we can take the support of temp data. Now let me just try to execute this and let's see what happens now. I just simply say demo/create. I got a form where I can just enter the name. For example, I provide a name called as Shaker. I click on create. I can see this. I got the page. Okay, and I just got this particular thing here called as welcome Shaker to ASP.NET MVC FAQ. The most important point that we have to understand is many people think that temp data cannot pass the information to the view. The point that we have to understand is temp data can also be accessed through the view. But the difference what happens is whenever I use a temp data value life is only till the subsequent request view is fully loaded. What is the meaning of my statement is, let me refresh this particular page. As soon as I refresh this page, I understand that I get an exception saying that null reference means the value of the temp data what I provided, once the page has been loaded, that information will not be existing. So it is always a good practice that when you use a temp data, since the value will be existing at one single place or for one single request till the value is loaded, it's always good practice to use a condition saying that temp data of uname, if this is not equal to null, then do this particular things. Else I can simply say welcome guest something to ASP.NET MVC FAQ. So in spite I'm not interested always in writing some if conditions on the view, just for the demo purpose I'm trying to show you in that way. Now I just say create. I provide some name, for example Shaker, and I click on create. We can see that the value will be displayed, means to the subsequent request I was able to access this particular information. When I try to refresh this, since the temp data value will not be maintained, I can just see that I get something called as guest. So it's a good practice that you always maintain the condition checking. Since we always prefer that we don't want to write this kind of code within the view, what we try to do is, we personally feel that this kind of heavy lift work we'll try to do it on some kind of models and everything. Here what I can do is, instead of doing here, I can check a condition in this way. If temp data of uname is not equal to null, I may set some kind of ViewBack dot username equal to temp data of uname dot toString, else I simply say ViewBack dot username equal to guest. Some kind of simplicity we try to do it. Then what we try to do is, instead of doing this heavy lift work at the view, I can simply say welcome ViewBack dot username to. We get almost a similar type of functionalities now. Now I try to specify this option, like say demo slash hello or demo slash create. Excuse. Now once I got this information, let's say that I provide a value called as shaker. I click on create. I got this view shaker. If I refresh it, I get the same guest. But assume that my requirement is not only that from one particular action to the subsequent request you wanted to pass the value. Assume that my requirement is I would like to have some href. I say demo slash options. I put a link saying that click here to view your actions or options, I say. Now I would like to have some particular action with the name called as options. Public action result options. I would like to return the view. Now how do I access the information? So ViewBack and ViewData was able to pass the information from one particular control action to the view, and we understood that temp data can only pass the information from one particular action request to the other action. Once the view is completely loaded, the value present within the temp data is completely cleared, so we have to handle in that. So in this case, so whenever we have a requirement such that the value what you have, you wanted to access across multiple controller actions and multiple views, then instead of using something called as a ViewBack or ViewData or Temp Data, we can take the support of sessions. So how do I do this? Means I have a create. Instead of storing the information on the temp data, what I try to do is I try to store the information on the session. Once I store the information on the session, I don't need all this particular thing, because the value what we stored in the session can be accessed everywhere. So let me just try to update my code here. So I go to my index, and instead of writing a statement like this, now what I can do is I can simply say welcome session of uname. Even session needs to be casted, so I just specify this thing. I converted that object to a string. Now what I try to do here is we have the ViewBack information, we have the session information which I am trying to display in the index, and I have options also. Let me add a view for this options. Now I say options supported for session of uname.toString, or I have an unordered list. We have a list item. Let's say add a new task, add modify existing data, some kind of list of tasks I'm just trying to do it, so that to inform the users that what you can just do it. Remove existing data, list all records. Now let me just try to observe this thing, execute this. So now what I try to do here is I just simply specify some option called as demo/create, and once I have this information that's available, I try to provide the values. I click on create. I can see that the information is accessible here. Let me refresh the page. I don't find any problem. I click on here to view our options. I can just see this information. So the final observation that we have to understand in this case is, whenever you wanted to pass the information from one controller action to a view, we can take the support of ViewData or ViewBack. Both stores the same way. Since ViewBack uses a dynamic expression, my advice is to use ViewBack. And whenever you wanted to pass the information from one controller action to the subsequent request, that is another action, we can use Temp Data. But the point you have to remember is Temp Data maintains the value only till the target view or the subsequent view fully loads. Once the view has been loaded, the value will expire. If I wanted to maintain the value across the controllers and views, then instead of using ViewBack, ViewData, Temp Data, use sessions. I hope you have understood this particular things, and if you like my video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. This encourages me to produce more and more video. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/ShekharOnline for you. In case if you have any queries or you require any kind of trainings, you can contact me to my mail ID shekharonline4you@gmail.com. Thanks for viewing.